1 hour and 30 minutes. We ask that you please pause and direct your attention to the following important safety demonstration. Located in the seat back pocket in front of you is a passenger.
Just landed yesterday in Denver, Colorado, and after a couple of layovers, we finally made it. It's a little bit chilly here, not quite what I expected, but it's nice, beautiful country, and right now, just on the way to go talk to the Adoption Perspectives radio show. Excited to go share my story and connect with those people and find a new way to make a difference in a different part of the country.
Could an ocean even hold the tears you cried with that?
Hi, welcome to Adoption Perspectives. This is Rebecca Volley, your host, and I'm the Executive Director of the Family to Family Support Network, and I'm so glad that you have joined us today for this show. I know that you're going to be blessed and you're going to just benefit from the wisdom of the young man that is with us today. Many of you know that the Family to Family Support Network is an expansion of the Family to Family Adoption Support Program at Parker Adventist Hospital. I want to thank Parker Adventist for continuing to sponsor this radio show. We are in our 4th year, and what an amazing ministry. We know the mission statement at Parker Adventist is to extend the healing ministry of Christ. And entering their hospital 10 years ago with this concept of supporting the adoption community, I wasn't quite sure what they were going to say, especially because no other hospital in the nation was really addressing the needs around infant adoption. Many of you know that we have 3 kiddos that came home through infant adoption, and they are now teenagers, and I am still standing, but I'm still standing because of a lot of the things that I have learned by talking to experts and other families, by hearing the voice of adoptees and birth parents. And, you know, we often say on the show, we need to listen well to love well. And I'm so thankful for those that have come on and have shared their story, and thankful to Parker Adventist for supporting this program and continuing to do so, even though I am no longer there as the adoption liaison. Having left there in January this very year, I'm excited to start the nonprofit of this Family to Family Support Network. And our hope truly is to bring the Family to Family Support Adoption Support Program into every hospital in the nation, and what that would look like. You know, often we have women that come in, they're considering adoption, choosing to parent, and having those resources from the very beginning can really empower parents to be able to be successful in their plan. If they go down the path of adoption, we want to make sure we're there for them, making sure they're getting their childbirth classes, preparing for their hospital time. We often say that hospital time is like a wedding and a funeral in the same room, because it is so emotional, especially now with openness, where we often have potential adoptive families there at the hospital. And then the need for post-adoption support became really clear. Bringing my kids home, I thought, you fill the crib, you bring them home, it's just the same. I'm now a mom. And it became really clear it's not bad, it's just different. And we need different tools to parent these children well. And so thankful for Adoption Perspectives radio show and the opportunities I've had to talk to experts in the field as to how to best care for these kids that have gone through the trauma of losing their first parent. So excited to talk. Speaking of trauma today, which, you know, hang in, this is going to be encouraging, it's going to be inspiring, because we have the author of the book, Overcoming Emotional Trauma, Life Beyond Survival Mode, Travis Lloyd. Travis is in Denver for a speaking engagement, and I am thrilled to have him joining me on Adoption Perspectives today. So welcome, Travis.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
What a great book. So I'm going to say the title again, Overcoming Emotional Trauma, Life Beyond Survival Mode. So obviously I just mentioned that my kids are in the process of making sense of the trauma of losing their birth parents and coming into our home as our kiddos. But your story is a little different. It's not domestic infant adoption, but you came through foster care. So I would love for you to back up and just share your story with us.
It always blows my mind when I show up to a show like this and somebody's actually giving me quotes out of my book. I'm like, oh,
did I say that? That was really good. That's awesome. I love that.
That was super awesome. But I appreciate you taking the time. That's super cool. So my background started the way that I ended up down this path initiated with my initial trauma of having gone through foster care, starting at the age of 9. Now, it's as you know, everyone has their own path, and everyone's path can be very, very different, or very, very similar, but different.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Common thread. Absolutely. Common threads, for sure.
And the basic underlying theme of understanding, the underlying emotional trauma is that each one of us has can experience the same exact thing, but have very, very different perceptions. And
Absolutely.
my perception at the time is my parents were going through a very brutal divorce, and my mother and father and sister ended up down their own different paths as a result of intergenerational curses and intergenerational cycles. It landed me where I'm a 9-year-old kid at home with a social worker picking me up to go to a foster home, not knowing what was happening, not knowing where I was going. To me, my younger years seemed fairly normal.
Sure.
But my sister is 6 years older than me, so she was a little more had a little more perspective into what was actually happening in the home. But everything to me, and this is something that is really important for people to remember, is to me it was normal.
Right.
And
right.
being pulled out of normal means that anything else is scary.
Absolutely.
And that's a really difficult thing for people to grasp sometimes when you're talking to somebody who's wanting to do the right thing, and they're trying to be good, and they're like, "This, why are you fighting me? This is really awesome."
Right.
And it's hard to grasp that and to accept that sometimes. But
that's so true, though. I mean, we just had a guest recently that was talking about the tendency to sabotage, and how they'll have these kids come in and they think, "Wow, we're giving them everything. This is what I'm sure they've always wanted, and all they want is to be back in their world."
What's normal.
And what's normal to them, right? And it may feel chaotic and it may feel unsafe, but that feels safe in its lack of safety, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So interesting that that's that overlap for you as far as normalcy is concerned.
So if I were to share a little bit about how my story went, first foster home, it was okay. Like, nothing bad happened. But what I realized in hindsight, it was kind of a respite home. I think I was there for about 30 days. And looking back on it, I realized there was just no love and compassion. I was placed in a room with 3 other kids on 3 separate mattresses next to each other, filling the entire room.
Wow.
And I was safe, but I didn't feel safe. And I didn't receive whatever, reassurance that I might have needed, even from these strangers who were stepping in as my parents at the time.
But just functional.
Yeah.
Just a space
just
for
kind
you
of
to
getting
be.
by. Yeah. And the second home that I went to, I later found out that it was kind of older woman, salt and pepper hair, nice, quiet little house. And I felt safe there. It was calm. Like, it was okay. Like, I was just me, myself, by myself, doing my own thing, playing calmly every day. And the one thing that she did for me was just have a calming, quiet presence.
Wow.
And she gave me a koala bear.
Oh, I love that.
I didn't have anything to cuddle with, and she knew that I needed some sort of comfort, even if I wasn't comfortable receiving it from her.
Sure.
And so I still have that koala bear. It still sits in my basement.
Little things that people do, and they just don't know what an impact they have.
Big of an impact
that was
it is.
huge.
Yeah, huge, super huge.
And you're having interactions with your family still during this time, if I remember from the book correctly.
Kind of. So I wasn't able to see my father, but I was, and my sister was in rehab at the time. So I was like 9 and she was like 15. So she coped by drugs,
Sure.
alcohol, running in the streets. And my mother had been in and out of the psych unit at the time as a result of her own intergenerational cycles and having an 8th grade education most of her life. She didn't know how to cope with the trauma of losing a spouse and everything going upside down. And unfortunately, we were in a situation in the place where we were at, the church that we were at, and the counseling that she was receiving. It kind of fell along the lines of you do as the man says type of thing, even when it wasn't healthy. And she didn't know how to figure it out for herself, what felt right or didn't feel right.
Wow.
And as a result, she ended up being placed on several psychotropic medications and received several diagnoses, which really, along with her own lack of knowledge and awareness, paired with that, really incapacitated her ability to parent. And so my connection with her at that time was just having seen her one time when she came to visit during the while I was in the two foster homes.
I think that's the scene that I remember in your book.
Yeah,
It was powerful.
It was, oh gosh, yeah, it is.
Oh.
Should I say it?
Yeah. I think, well, that's up to you, but I've got you on the mic, Travis.
So back in that first foster home, the powerful scene that you're talking about was when I was out playing in the woods, right? And this house was on a cul-de-sac. And all I remember doing while I was there was I would try to go play with other kids. And I would spend time watching The Terminator in somebody else's house, right?
Because you were so not supposed to be doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it was horrible.
Yes. Everything else is bad, but this is good.
Yes. And then I remember I was walking back to the house, and I was walking through the woods that are off to the right side of the house. And I remember seeing my mom's white Ford Thunderbird, this 1989 white Ford Thunderbird. And this Ford Thunderbird rolls into this cul-de-sac. And I get so excited because I'm going to go see my mom. And I thought it'd be super cool to surprise her. So she parks next to the house, and she gets out. And she starts walking up to the house, and I'm creeping slowly through the woods. And as soon as she starts walking towards the stairs of the house, I run and I surprise her, and I'm like trying to give her a hug. And she jumped and was startled, and she freaked out, and she said, "You're just like your sister, aren't you?
Oh.
You're out there doing drugs, aren't you?" And I was 9.
Oh my gosh.
And-
You were
and
just
I-
surprising your mom.
Yeah,
I was like yelling at the book when I read that. I was like, no, that's not what he was doing.
Yeah, and just within the last 6 months, I've gained insight as to all of the things that led up to her thinking that way, feeling that way, etc. And so I've actually just recently received healing in regards to that moment.
Nice.
And was able to discuss it with my sister even.
Wow. Wow. And I'm sure for her, when you talk about all the complexity in her life during that time, you were the one that hadn't maybe gone off the rails yet. So she was anticipating that. She was like
I
waiting
guess I never
for
thought of that. Yeah.
Like you're the one thing, just, now I'm going to call it because this is so painful. I'm sure that was really painful for her.
As soon as that moment ended, like, I didn't know what to think, or it was a moment when I realized that the mother that I had always known, because I was kind of a mama's boy when I was young, before things fell apart, and I knew in that moment she was gone. She was no longer the same mom.
Yeah.
And I held the tears until I went back to that back room by myself in the cold white walls with that mattress on the floor. And then I just laid there and cried. And it was just, I knew that that's where it was going to be.
Yeah. Grief stinks. I guess as you were talking about that, we have our own mental illness in my family, and my mother has passed away. But when she passed away, people were like, "Oh, this must be so hard." And I was like, "Well, the mom I knew left a while back, and so you kind of have that gap of grief. And I think it comes in waves when you have things like that, where you have kind of the person you knew, and then how mental illness can come in and how it can shift your reality.
Yeah.
And grief is, talk about trauma, complex trauma, to try to make sense of all that.
Yeah.
So you got your koala.
Yeah.
What happens from there?
So I had my koala bear, and then after a little while, some new strangers showed up. And that was only my second placement, but I was already accustomed to when some stranger shows up at the door, you grab your things, and now I'm grabbing my koala bear, and you go. Now, the difference was these people that showed up at the door were my biological maternal aunt and uncle and grandfather and his new wife.
But you've never met them.
I didn't know they existed.
That's why they were strangers.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you didn't even have a word for them, a name for them.
No, I had no clue who they were. But that's what comes along with the intergenerational cycles of when my mother was dealing with being molested and dealing with being abused in her childhood. She completely disconnected and had no clue how to cope other than to no longer feel that they exist.
Right.
The people that's associated with it, gone. And so we're living in a completely different part of the country, and now all of a sudden these people show up, "Hey, we're your family."
Oh my God. Excuse me? I can't imagine.
But I was already to the point where I'm like, okay, like, tell me where to go.
I do.
And so my my aunt and uncle packed up all of our belongings in our old house in Seattle and put it on a U-Haul. My uncle drives that U-Haul from Seattle back to Iowa.
Oh my gosh.
And then my aunt gives me my uncle's plane ticket. This is well before 9/11, right?
Sure.
So they're not checking.
You're not showing IDs.
They're not.
Right.
I'm not taking my shoes off.
Right.
And so I became Ronald Kellogg, age 63.
I did think you were in your 60s. I didn't want to say anything, and they didn't.
I
think
found the
twice.
water.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Good deal. Well, you look at that. It was such a different world, but that was probably really significant. Obviously, I mean, what an act of sacrifice to do that and be willing to drive your stuff halfway across the country.
Yeah.
And you're still trying to make sense of all this because these people are strangers, and all you know is that you now have his ticket and you're leaving.
Yeah. And what I had been told was that my mom was not well and she was in the hospital.
Oh, okay.
And so I get on this plane, and this is a moment when I knew something was changing in me, and I didn't know why. I didn't have the words for it.
Sure.
I didn't know how to express it, but I remember I fell asleep on the plane, right? And I was small enough back then to where I could just rest my head on the tray in the plane and have a completely great sleep. I wish I could do that nowadays.
I know. You're not able to do that.
No. And so we landed in Iowa, and the one thing that I remember is as we were coming out of the airport, my aunt, again, stranger, starts telling me what to do. And I think she's doing it in an appropriate way,
Sure.
but she's expecting me to be the submissive child.
Oh, geez.
And she's telling me to put a coat on because it's cold. It's different weather. I don't need a coat. You're not my mama. Like, leave me alone. And so I start to fight and I start to yell and make a scene. And mind you, like all growing up, I was a completely kind-hearted kid. Like I wanted to open doors for people. I wanted to help people. I wanted to say please and thank you. And now all of a sudden I'm in the airport in Des Moines, Iowa, screaming that I am refusing to put a coat on.
Oh my God.
And that's the initial response of traumatizing experiences, of being pulled from your normal.
Right. Right. Well, you look at that and think that you weren't going to depend on anyone, I imagine, at that point.
Oh, yeah.
I always think about the analogy where people teach attachment by using the rubber band. Have you ever seen that activity?
No.
Where it was a professor that showed it in class one day, and I heard someone share it with me, but they had the person in the front row hold the rubber band, and he pulled back as he was talking, and then he slipped and let go, and it snapped the person in the front row. And he's like, oh, dude, I'm so sorry. Here, hold that again. So as he's talking, he's pulling back the rubber band again, and it snaps him again. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Here, grab this again. The guy grabs it again, starts pulling back, and the guy lets go and snaps him a third time. And this guy in the front's getting mad. So you can imagine the next time it happens, guy in the front grabs hold, professor starts pulling back, and the guy in the front just lets go, and he won't get snapped again. And that's attachment. It's like, I got attached and I got hurt. I got attached, I got hurt. I got attached. You know what? I'm letting go of the rubber band. I'm not gonna risk it anymore. And it sounds like you were at that point.
That's a very practical way to look at it. I'm going to use that.
You should, because it's what makes sense to me. Because I think we try to make sense of how kids protect themselves.
Yeah.
And isn't that they've learned it?
Yeah.
That's the hard part. And I think we have so many people that they just pour into kids, and they're like, "But I love him, and he's amazing, and he just pushes me away and pushes me away and pushes me away." And I'm like,
Yeah.
because he's like, that hurts. I can't go there. And it sounds like you were at that point.
You have to ask why.
Yeah.
What's the reasoning behind these behaviors?
What's behind that behavior?
And don't take it personally, you know.
Right.
You have to have more of an understanding as to analyzing where they're coming from and what could have their experiences be based off of how they're presenting to me.
Right. And it's not but I do and do and do for you. You know, these kids. Oh,
gosh.
Really? I don't care that you made me scalloped potatoes for dinner. You know, there's not.
I want mac and cheese.
I know, exactly. And if you give me that, I'm going to want that.
Yeah.
And you don't have what I want in this house, by the way. But I think there's so much, we have this idea that we have to get it back, you know, and I think there's this misconception these kids are going to fall into these houses and be like, oh, oh, I'm so thankful for
Yeah.
you. And they're scared, and that fear just takes over, and they're not going to be dependent on you.
Oh,
it's
not
too
at all.
painful.
Not at all.
So how did that play out then with your aunt and uncle?
So I stayed with them on their farmhouse in Iowa. I always mention this.
What was that?
Can you say culture shock? Like
From Seattle? I know
Yes,
Seattle.
like
So.
the Space Needle to farmhouse with a 1/4-mile lane,
Oh my
driving up to
gosh.
the farmhouse, and corn and beans and
Go slow because you got all the dips in the driveway, right? The big
Oh, yeah, you know
potholes.
exactly what I'm
I
talking
do.
about.
I know where you're talking.
So they put me up in this house, and they get me started in this small town school where it was really, really difficult for me to make friends. Because I'm already reactive
Totally.
to anything that has to do with a potential
Probably
attachment.
just with the fists
I'm
up, right?
Yeah, well, I'm with a rubber band, like.
Oh,
And
I don't give the kid a rubber band. Now, academically, were you where you should be, or
no.
Okay.
I started to slump right
Sure.
around that time.
sure? But
And-
prior to that, had everything been intact, you
Yeah.
probably would be.
Yeah.
Okay. Seemed like an intelligent guy, but we react to that, right?
Yeah,
We're like
yeah.
in survival mode. We can't take any
Exactly.
information.
It's hard. And I was doing okay at that point, although I had missed, it was sloping downward because I had started to miss school and everything. But my aunt and uncle put me in this small town school a few miles away from this farmhouse. And a couple months later, my sister and my mom show up. So my sister got out of rehab. My mom got out of the psych unit, and they got back in that Ford Thunderbird, and they drove it from Seattle.
Car again.
And they,
You were like, I am not going to scare her this time, right? Were you like coming out with your hands up?
no, but that's the thing is I had so much attachment and love and want to be wanted by my family.
Sure.
That I didn't think about that at all by the time I saw them driving up. And so I run out of the house, and my mom gives me a hug, and my sister gives me a hug, and it feels normal again, except my dad's in Seattle, right? And after a few months, my maternal family, my mom's side of the family, they helped us get a trailer. And so we lived in a trailer and started going to school. But the one thing that I noticed was that no matter where you go, until you really work on your heart, until you really work on figuring out how to grow, it follows you.
Yeah, you have to take you with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very true.
It's unfortunate sometimes. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. So my sister started dealing. My sister started using. My sister dropped out of school. My mom, I still don't, to this day, don't have a clear picture of everything that my mom was into, and she doesn't even remember half of it.
Sure,
But she was on so many psychotropic medications and partying and drinking and gone a lot. I was at home by myself a lot and getting in fights. I mean, right now, like at your angle you can see right now, you see my septum.
Oh, yeah.
That's from the first time I got jumped when I was 11 when I moved to Iowa.
Little broken nose action.
Yeah.
Wow. See, that's the downfall of radio.
Yeah, right?
His nose looks really broken. That's the downfall. 11 years old. So you're a fighter.
I wasn't a fighter though. I just got
Really?
jumped.
So did people
Because-
just target that?
Yeah, like I was
something about you kind of thing?
I was in a neighborhood, this trailer park where all the kids grew up with very unhealthy families. They grew up fighting their families. They grew up fighting the kids in the neighborhood. And I just came in there like, I want to play basketball.
Oh, geez.
And
They jumped you.
yeah,
Broke your nose.
yeah.
Oh, feel a lot of love. I can't imagine. So as everyone starts, we're going to have to take a break here pretty quick,
Sure,
but as
sure.
everyone starts falling apart again, what's your response? Do you just kind of go out on your own?
My
Do you-
response is I'm doing anything and everything I can to just get by. That's where I'm truly living in survival mode,
Sure,
where
sure.
the book title comes from. And so I'm making my own food. I'm learning how to make mac and cheese. I'm making cereal. Like there's no clean dishes, so I'm using a big pot and pan to mix my cereal in it. And
Oh my gosh.
and I'm just doing whatever I can to get by, and until the behaviors start to show up more, and I'm struggling. I'm missing school all the time. I'm flunking out of 7th grade, and then I get put into placements.
Wow. So we are going to take a quick break. I think you're the perfect example. I often say on the show that we go through what we go through to help people go through what we went through.
Yeah.
And I would say that much of what you're doing circles back into walking this path with others, sharing your wisdom through your speaking and your hip hop, and you're, as I said, an author. So
Did
overcoming.
you tell them I do hip hop?
I just did, and I totally watched you on the YouTube. My kids always mock me. Oh, Mom, you been watching the YouTube? Yeah, I watched you on the YouTube, on the YouTube. But how fun is that? So, I mean, I want to hear more about that too. But I also want to really get a chance to share about how you are helping others that are coming behind you on this path. So stay with us for the second half of Adoption Perspectives. Hi, welcome back to Adoption Perspectives. This is Rebecca Volley, your host, and I'm the Executive Director of the Family to Family Support Network, and I'm having a great time talking to Travis Lloyd today. Travis is an author, a mentor, a speaker, a hip-hop artist. He's got a man of many hats, and I'm really enjoying talking with him about his new book, Overcoming Emotional Trauma, and his story that really led him to this work. So welcome back, Travis.
So, when we went to
Yes.
we were just kind of right at this storyline of where I ended up, going to placements, and those intergenerational cycles followed us from Seattle back to Iowa, where we landed. And so I spent time in group homes. I spent time in an inpatient psych unit for a month. I spent time in some youth shelters, kind of bouncing back and forth. And in the midst of that, one of the things that I'd like to share with your audience, and it just kind of hit me that this is a story that would be beneficial possibly for your people. And it's that one of the times that I went to placement, I went to a youth shelter, was when I had just gotten into an altercation with my mother. And I didn't feel safe. My mother didn't feel safe. She didn't know how to parent me in a way that controlled my behaviors. And so it was a physical altercation, and I jumped up, and I was getting ready to leave the house because I needed some space. I needed to chill. And again, I was accustomed to spending time by myself, doing things being at home by myself for multiple days, just running the streets. So I didn't think twice about just leaving the house. And she didn't want me to leave the house. So she grabbed me, and she had her arm around my chest and my neck, and I felt suffocated. And
trapped, I would imagine.
I felt trapped.
Yeah.
And so I bit her arm, and I ran out the house. And when I came back to the house, there was a sheriff there. And when I walked up, the sheriff just looked at me. And mind you, I'm like 11 or 12.
Oh my gosh.
The sheriff immediately starts hounding me about how if I was older, I'd be in jail for assault charges. And never once did he ask me why.
Wow.
Why would you bite your mom?
Wow.
Never once did they ask me anything about what life was like, or if I felt safe, or, and I'm sure, in most places it's a little bit different, but the same goes when you've got a child in your house. It always goes back to that understanding the reasoning behind things, and instead of to that punitive controlling of oh, you did this, you get this.
Right. And we focus so much on how we're going to change the behavior, but often if we get to the trigger of the behavior goes away.
Yeah.
But we often don't go there.
Yeah.
We don't stop and ask. I think there's always that piece. I'm sure that in that moment you were not thinking, I am going to bite her.
Yeah.
And then she's going to let me go. I think that idea that there's rational choice and rational decisions being made when we're escalated like that, we know with brain science, that's just not the case. Yeah. And yet we want kids to go through this rational decision point, and even some of the consequences we set out for them. There's no connection there that's going to unplug that reaction when we're dealing with a situation like that.
Yeah. So like in the midst of that, this guy is threatening me and talking down to me, and I'm not hearing a word he's saying.
Right.
I'm just,
yeah.
Because I'm just like, why is this happening? Like, what are you talking about?
Right. And you probably really learned at that point, what I have to say doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That was probably a huge turning point, I would imagine, that why are you not even asking me?
Yeah.
And part of your work is obviously giving voice to people that have gone through trauma. So, I mean, really,
one of the things that I like to share is in I guess you could call it my slogan, is one of my missions in life is to give a voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless.
I like that.
And It definitely is based off of my personal experiences of having been hopeless and voiceless for so long and finding a way to have power, be empowered, and make a difference for others who are going through the same things.
Wow.
So the one thing that helped make a big difference was understanding that just one person can make a difference. And so I'd like to share with you a couple stories. One is when I was in 8th grade, my aunt had taken me in out of this, trailer in this life that I was living with my bio mom, and gave me a safe place to live. So with that safe place, I went from flunking out of school, almost being held back, to then progressing and joining in on some sports. And that's I was actually forced to play sports. I was told I have to play 2 sports every year.
Wow.
In order to just have some sort of outlet. And so I got to choose what I did. I had choice, but I was still forced to do something constructive. And
how did they make you do that?
well, it was my aunt.
Okay.
It was my aunt who had taken me in.
She couldn't even get you to put a coat on when you first
Yeah.
got there. That's what just went through my head was like, well, how did they convince
Well,
you
this
that...
is a few years later now.
Okay, so there's been built
So there's-
relationship, and
yeah.
some trust there,
Yep.
and now, okay, that
Yep,
makes sense.
There,
So she's,
there was a rapport, and
yeah, she's earned that. That makes sense.
I was able to see, okay, like this is safe. She wants what's best for me, and I know that what I'm experiencing does not feel right.
Right, right.
And I was able to just make that discernment myself by the time I was 13 in 8th grade.
And what'd you pick?
Well, I chose what sports did I choose? I chose baseball and wrestling. My
Nice.
favorite was wrestling because it was all me. There was no standing out in the outfield thinking. It was just go go go. And
I love
that's
in the
what I
book when
needed.
you said it was just up to you to earn the win.
Yeah.
Whereas you have to rely. We already talked about you kind of struggling with relying on other people. You're on a team of baseball players. They mess up, you mess up. Like you have this interdependence that you also weren't into at that point.
Yeah.
Does
It
that
was
make
very
sense?
difficult for me to just feel a part of
Yeah,
anything.
yeah. So wrestling makes
So
sense.
wrestling was it. Yeah. And with that stability and with that focus, by the end of my 8th grade year, my grades got up. I even had an A in one of my classes. And at the end of the school year, the very last day, one of the teachers taps me on the shoulder as I'm walking out. And I'm literally thinking like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to get suspended in the last 15 minutes of school. And and then she grabs me and I look at her and I'm sitting here like I'm just on my way out. Like I want to go out to the sun. I don't care what you have to say. And she says, Travis, Mr. Fedler and I choose one person every year to just recognize. This isn't something that gets recognized in a school assembly. Nobody else knows about this. But we chose you this year. And we want you to know that we're proud of you and that you've come a long way and that we think you're going to do really well in high school.
Wow.
And that was one of the memories that was burned and ingrained into my brain, that when things got bad, I was able to push through because somebody told me
They believed in you.
that they believed in me.
Yeah.
And that made it okay for me to believe in me
Right.
when everything else in the world felt like I couldn't. And then at that same time period, though, that time period when I was in the group home and the shelter and all this stuff and spending time in the streets myself, I had joined in with the wrong crowds at the age of 11 and 12 and 13 and was already on probation. So I was serving all of my probation hours and I got done and my aunt is taking me to my final probation meeting with my probation officer. And we sit down and she says, okay, you're done. And then she looks at my aunt and she says, we'll see you back here in a couple of years. They usually come back. And
she says this while you're sitting right there.
yeah.
Awesome.
And I was like so proud of myself because I felt like I had learned so much in the work that I did, cleaning a church, cleaning the cemetery, being around other positive people in the community that I wouldn't have otherwise
Your
met.
teachers believe in you and you're going to go
Yeah.
far and you're getting your feet under you. And
So it was just like one of those hits where a judgment call that was inappropriately placed, which so many of us can do easily. I mean, we judge people every day when they're, oh gosh, yeah, I bet they don't make any money.
Right.
Oh gosh, yeah.
They're not going
where
anywhere.
Are they coming from?
Just wait till she's a teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That type of stuff, instead of just
Totally.
giving that unconditional love and acceptance, regardless of what somebody looks like, where they come from, or what their experiences have been. And that is the key to empowering somebody, even if they are on that path. You give them that empowerment, like Mrs. Ross did when she told me, "We believe in you," my teacher. You give them the empowerment, and then when the moment is right for them, they'll have what it takes to move forward.
Right.
Crazy.
So were you able to balance that? Were you able to say, hey, go talk to my teachers? Were you able to take that with a grain of salt? Or were you like, oh man, does this woman know more than those teachers do?
It really, it really hit me and made me question myself for a long time. That one little moment. And it made it easier when I got older. So fast forward now, high school, I'm going to skip through it because it was stable. Like, the one thing that my aunt did for me during high school was that when I had a desire to know about my family, to see my mom, she would say, I don't want you to because I don't feel like it's safe. But if you feel comfortable and you know you can do it safely, I'll allow you to drive to go see your mom on Sundays. Like,
wow.
Because I wanted to just be able to go see her on Sundays. And sometimes she didn't remember that I was there. So it was dark, depressed, like all the psych meds and like all this stuff. It was just a very depressing environment to be in. But I would still just go sit with her for a little while.
What validation from your aunt to say, this may be hard for me to let you do this, but I value where you come from.
Yeah.
And I value your needs to go and do this.
And it was a fight though, because my mom and my aunt, they clash in
I'm sure.
big time. And so it was actually a fight with my aunt at first. And I just wouldn't give in.
Oh, wow.
You know, like nobody replaces my mom.
Sure. We think about that divided loyalty that happens so often, whether kids in foster care or even just adoption, whether domestic or international. You have that loyalty issue where you feel like I can't love you because I have to love her.
Yeah.
It's not an either or now, though. We understand it needs to be an and.
Yeah.
That there's the roots and the wings and all the different analogies
Exactly.
people use to help these kids be whole.
Yeah.
Is to embrace both. But man, that must have been hard because she had invested so much into you in hopes that you would stay on that path. Do you feel like spending that time with your mom helped deter you from other paths? Like, did it help you stay grounded in where you were with your aunt?
I think it made me appreciative for having stability.
Sure.
And having food.
Yeah.
And having spending money
And not mac and cheese in the pot.
Being able to do what I needed to do, being able to buy wrestling shoes and be involved. And it's not the material aspect; it's the involvement and the community aspect. Because I wasn't able to do that when I didn't have stability, and then I was not able to have positive experiences, which helped develop my character and my personality in a way that would have been developed in a very different way in the streets.
So when you think about that point of 18, 19, 20, we see these kids coming out of the system, they're aging out, and the concerns we have, obviously, the statistics and what they say. What happened in your world then? Because you're doing wrestling, you feel pretty good, you're doing your grades,
So my senior year wrestling, I had a bit of a disappointment because I was picked to go to state and I was picked to win districts. Then I got the flu and so I lost to somebody that I had pinned earlier that year.
Really, Lord.
And I'm like, and so once the wrestling season was done, I was like, oh, I have nothing else to live for. What is this? And I just started to spiral and I started to party, and I started to go down a bad path, and my behavior started to come back. And I remember in that same time period, I had a dream. And in this dream, I remembered a time when I was younger, and I had forgotten this memory. I remember a time when I went back to my old church in Seattle, and I saw my dad there, but there was a restraining order that stated I was not allowed to have contact with him. And so I ran up to him because I wanted to give him a hug, and he was afraid to give me a hug because he didn't want somebody to see. And I woke up from that dream screaming, "Daddy!" And I'm like this 18-year-old kid waking up in a cold sweat screaming for my daddy. And that started to repeat a lot of the negative behaviors, the cycles and underlying issues that I didn't know why they were coming back to me.
Those triggers.
Yeah. And so the only thing that I was able to do was what I knew, what I watched my sister do, my mother do, how to cope with those things. And that was drinking, partying, sex, being around the people that made me feel normal. Because normal people made me feel not normal. And so I would be around the people who made me feel normal. And those were the people who were doing all of those things. And by the time I graduated from high school, my behaviors were so bad that I was yelling and cussing at my aunt. I was grown. I did what I wanted. And I was driving a car that she bought for me, talking to her on a Nokia 8700 cell phone that she bought for me. And I'm on my way back to this farmhouse where they had given me a home, a safe home to be in. I'm screaming at her and cussing at her and telling her how grown I am. And then I get there and she's in the sliding glass door. You know, we never locked the door back then because we were always there. And the only time we locked it was if we were all in there. So the sliding glass door was just always unlocked. And I walk up to it and she slides that glass door shut and locks it. And she had tears running down her face. And I knew without saying anything that I had gone too far. And there was nothing. And so I just turned around, drove away in tears, was homeless for a while, and which, you know, sneaking in and out of my girlfriend's house to sleep and, you know, get a second job, but wasn't doing well in the job. And it just kept spiraling from there. But then I started to realize, like, some of the people that used to be at my sister's party, my sister's parties when she was younger and she was dealing and all these really negative people, they started showing up to my parties at this apartment that I had gotten after I was homeless for a while. And I just was like, no. I had this light bulb moment because I had those experiences where people told me how good I was, because people believed in me and told me it was possible for me to do something else. And I realized, gosh, I don't have to be here. And so I went back to my aunt and I went back to that same old farmhouse and sat down with her and I was kind of in tears and I just said, I can't live like this. And I thought, you know, life is over. Like, there's nowhere for me to go. There's nothing for me to do. Like, I have nothing. And she pulled out this folder and she said, do you remember when I forced you to sign all those papers that you didn't want to look at about 8 months ago? And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, no, of course I don't remember. I was probably on my way to go drink. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And we pulled it out and she said, those were all of your applications for the state schools and your FAFSA forms. And she said, you've been accepted to every state school.
Oh my gosh.
And here's your acceptance letters. And so
did she do the right thing, locking the sliding glass door?
Yeah.
Because I know I have families that are like, and I've said the words myself, what I'm doing to help is no longer helpful.
Yeah.
You know, where I don't know where from here
and
I can help in that healing.
It's the most difficult thing to let go of what you're trying to control, because it gets to a point where you're trying to control when so much is out of your control and you want to help so much.
Right.
But you have to let go sometimes and just trust that whatever you've done to that point is going to guide them in the right direction. And if it's now 3, 6 months, 3 years, 6 years down the road, one way or another, you got to let them do it. And
how encouraging for all those families that I know are listening, that have had to draw the line and say, it's no longer helpful.
Well, and now here's the thing is there was no judgment. There was no criticism. It was just, I'm done. I'm not going to try and explain to you how much you're hurting me. I'm done.
Yeah.
But when you come crying back to me, I'm going to give you a hug and I'm going to help you go to college.
Wow.
And
very prodigal son, you know, that idea of I'm not going to come and shame you. And I think we see so much of that shame piece in all of this, where the tendency is to want to, well, I do and do and do for you, you know, and you're not thankful, you're not grateful, you're this, you're that. And she really didn't do that with you.
Yeah.
She was like, no, come back in here and let's pick up where we left off. And how gracious.
You have to give of yourself in tough situations, expecting nothing in return.
What does she say now? I know I'm jumping ahead, but what's your world like with her now?
Well, we're jumping ahead quite a bit because I own a house down the block from them. And
I know, I can't wait to get to that point.
And we've still worked on developing and understanding how intergenerational cycles even impacted them, and their relationship as siblings, and my ability to find my own identity and continue to grow in my own. This is who I am away from those people who were there for me, and that's been a struggle to accept.
Yeah. Okay, you can go back.
But other than that,
I did a little leapfrog.
It's good, and I still steal food out of their fridge.
There you go. Don't ever stop doing that. That's her normal. She'll be like, why is all this food here? He hasn't been by. So as you're going through that, you finally come back, you go into college, and then when did you start speaking? When did you realize that you had a story to tell that could inspire?
I think there's still a little bit of a gap there because I made it to college. I made it. I made it. I don't even know what college is, but I'm going to struggle every single day to fight to make it because I'm probably not going to pass. I'm more likely to not pass. And when I graduated from high school, people were surprised that I graduated. So
why would you think this is any different?
And so it made it very difficult for me to feel comfortable because I didn't know if I should be there. So I started to seek comfort in other ways. And
so college wasn't textbook 4 years.
No, not at all. I was in jail a couple times my sophomore year and seeking friendships the wrong way. And when I finally made it through, all those years in college, I'm coping by writing rap lyrics and expressing myself and finding ways to find other people who are like me. So then, if we were to fast forward to when I graduate from college, I got started with all this because when I graduated, I felt like I had no purpose.
Wow.
It was clearly a state of depression. What do I do with my life? Where do I go?
Just lack of identity, lack of structure.
And I didn't know how to develop that or to seek it or find it because for those 4.5 years in college, I had it structured for me. I was working in a nursing home for 3 days a week. I had a full course load. I was spending time in a studio, learning rap lyrics all the time. And in my spare time outside of that, I was stealing and selling stolen goods with people that I had connected with in the area.
Wow.
And
such different worlds.
It's this, yes, very, very different worlds happening at the same time, which is how Dr. Gregory Keck came up with the idea for a chapter in my book called Two Screens, which he kind of analyzed.
Fascinating. I would love for you, we have just a couple minutes left, but I would love for you to talk about that though, because that chapter really struck me. And I think that when you're talking about trauma, I even see, we did a recent interview with a woman that placed her child for adoption. And as I was reading that, I was like, oh, this is even what I see for her and the gaps in memory and things like that when you're talking about that trauma.
Sure.
So will you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's really relevant regardless of the trauma that is common.
Sure. Well, and that's where a lot of people start to self-hate because they're running these two screens and they don't know why. They want to be good. They don't know why they feel comfortable being bad. And so they stay being bad. And they end up in jail and prison as drug addicts, coping in different ways. And so Dr. Keck thought it was so, when I was telling him these stories, he thought it was so amazing that I was able to run two screens because on one side I'm doing really well and I'm performing in a difficult school program. I was originally a business major, but I switched to become a registered nurse. So I was a nursing major doing this whole program while running the streets with these people stealing, and the dynamics of that caused a lot of self-hate for me. That is something that I spent the last 10 years starting to figure out. Okay, this is who I am. I can claim who I am, and I can choose to be where I'm at and do what I want to do in a positive way. And the opportunity to do that came when I I had an opportunity after I was in this mode of depression where I'm not doing anything worthwhile. I'm working 3 12-hour shifts in an emergency department. I'm taking care of these kids who are getting shot and people who are coming in with industrial accidents from the the local plant, their arms cut off. And,
how depressing.
And it's just constant, busy. And I had no passion in my life. So I was open to about any opportunity, good or bad, just to get that adrenaline rush, just to get that passion, just to get that focused drive. Like, what am I here for? Why am I not feeling good? And luckily, what happened to come along was an opportunity to work with a foster care empowerment program. And the moral of that story is I had to teach these kids how to express themselves, learn about their stories in a way that impacts community awareness and legislative action. And in doing so, it helped me realize, wow, all of this survival mode that I've been living, I'm not alone. These kids have the same issues that I've always had. And now I have an education and an income and enough stability on my own where I don't know how to create a life that I enjoy, but I can help them do that. And
that's what drives your passion.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I spent that year, we're talking like 2007 and 2008, 2009, when I was working with these kids. And within 3 weeks of volunteering with the program, I was a regional facilitator. Within 3 months, I was helping facilitate at a foster care program, national conference in Atlanta. And then within a year, I was helping start the same type of program in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Oh my gosh.
And it was there like when people were like, hey, how much do you charge to do this stuff? And so next thing you know, I'm getting paid to go, because for a while I was giving up time at work, and it was really starting to limit my ability to feel secure in myself. Then people started offering to pay when I started saying no. And
wow. And the response you got when you spoke, I loved in the book where you talked about the first time that you spoke and you were like, oh my gosh, that was awful.
It was so embarrassing. And I'm going to be honest with you, like, this is what I do full time now. Like, I'm a professional speaker, author, and hip hop artist and performer and consultant. Like, I help other people figure out how to live this life as well. But it's still a challenge. It's still a focus. I'm just 1 year out from leaving my careers in healthcare. I was a mental health mobile crisis worker up until a year ago, and I was a pediatric ER nurse for several years before that. And I still am licensed and help out occasionally in a pediatric ER just to keep my license current.
Right, little PRN.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not often when people know what that means. And
I learned in healthcare. I came out of a 6th grade classroom because I was like, you guys talking letters. Would you help me here? I don't know what you're talking about. So I get it. I totally get it. So your plan is the next year to walk away from that and just do this full time because the need is huge.
Yeah.
What you're offering is huge.
And just being able to connect with people who've been there is huge, and I never imagined the response that I would have from just sharing my story. That's it. And then as I'm getting older and the professional experiences I have, being able to apply the basic principles for growth, the basic principles for connecting in difficult situations, in crisis situations, being able to offer that to anyone and everyone who's willing to listen. I had no clue that's what I was meant to do. But it truly is my calling, and I can't do anything else without feeling like I did 3 months after I graduated from college working in an ER with no purpose in life.
Absolutely. It's what you're crafted for. And what's your story, the impact of your story. So, okay, overcoming emotional trauma, life beyond survival mode. How do they find information about you and how do they buy this book? Because I'm telling you, I get a lot of books. I glance through them and think, oh, I loved it. I thought it was a page turner. I love the stories in it.
Wow.
So I encourage you, listeners, overcoming emotional trauma, life beyond survival mode, and not just foster care. Because again, I think I found this resonating for me with other people I know that have gone through trauma.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, this is good all around.
Well, let me put it this way. Being in healthcare, you know that people who work in healthcare deal with difficult situations, right?
Absolutely.
Every day.
And they're amazing.
And then if I were to ask that question to people who work in the service industry, in corporate offices, they deal with difficult situations. They deal with difficult people. And that is like, when we see difficult situations, what do we usually do? We kind of sidestep. Oh, I got my own things to deal with.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like we avoid it as much as possible because we all have our own crap.
Yeah.
But
totally.
the one thing that I always challenge people on is how much of your life are you going to spend saying you have your own crap to deal with without dealing with it?
Yeah.
And that is the basic underlying reason why I feel this book is powerful, is because, yeah, it's an autobiographical approach. I'm using my personal stories to reinforce things, but it helps anyone and everyone to just kind of take a deeper look at the little things in their lives that are holding them back from being who they're meant to be, who they're called to be, and being there for people need when they need them.
Absolutely. Because you even talk about that. Like, how do you listen well? And we talk so much on this show about listening well to love well. And they're step by step. I loved it reading the book and being like, yes, he's done this. Not only, I think a lot of people tell us what to do, but they haven't really done it.
Sure.
Like, congratulations for telling me what to do. Have you done this? Because when you're rubber hits the road, you want to know, does this really work?
Yeah.
And I thought it was really helpful. So how can they find your website?
www.overcomingemotionaltrauma.com is a site, and if you sign up there, you'll get discount codes, free quotes, and inspiration that will help along the way. You can also join just by searching for it on Facebook, where quotes are posted as well.
And your music on the YouTube.
On the YouTube, yeah. And if you're not able to write it down, but I encourage you to, please join me at overcomingemotionaltrauma.com, or simply Google search that or my name, Travis Lloyd.
Travis Lloyd, thank you so much for joining me on Adoption Perspectives today.
Appreciate you.
So fun. I want to thank all of you for joining us for Adoption Perspectives today. Let me encourage you again, if you have not visited our website, please do so at familytofamilysupport.org. You can sign up for email alerts when our radio shows are archived like this one. So please join us there. Also, you can track us on Facebook on our Adoption Perspectives radio show page, as well as our Family to Family Support Network page. So again, thank you so much for joining us for Adoption Perspectives today. Have a great week. Take care, and God bless.
'Cause you gave life to me, a brand new world to see, like playing baseball with my son.